Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So first off, I want to apologize for not being as active on YouTube as I would like to be. I just started internship this semester, so I have been pretty busy with that, being at my internship site full-time plus having my last class. But I'm hoping to get better at that as the semester goes on and get more used to my new schedule. I also want to say thank you so much for 300 subscribers. That absolutely blows my mind. So in celebration of that, I have decided to go through all of my previous videos and go through the comments and find which ones seem to be asked the most frequently. I figured it might be helpful both to me and to you to have the answers to these questions all in one place. So let's see, I've picked 10 questions that I get asked the most frequently on this channel. So let's get into it. Okay, so the question I get asked the most by far on my channel is, does my bachelor's degree have to be in psychology in order for me to pursue a graduate degree in psychology or counseling? And I think most people are surprised to hear that the answer to that is no, it's not necessary. I won't lie, it does help a lot. So when you get to grad school, there's things that you're already familiar with that your professors are talking about. I think it gives you a little bit of an advantage, but it's not a necessity. I personally know counselors that did their undergrad in things ranging from accounting to education to music performance. It doesn't have to be even remotely related to psychology, but like I said, it does help a lot. But I will say the thing that you can't get into grad school in psychology or counseling without is experience. Psychology is pretty broad, so there's a whole slew of things you could do, but something that's at least loosely tied to psychology in terms of experience, whether it be research, work, internships, whatever, that will definitely come in handy during the application process. Now, I can't speak for all schools and all grad programs because I have seen some that if you don't have a bachelor's degree in psychology, they require that you at least have taken some psychology courses. It's usually around like 18 credits worth. But the short answer to that question is no, your bachelor's degree does not have to be in psychology. Which leads me to another question that I get a lot, which is, I didn't get my undergrad degree in psychology, but now I've changed my mind and I want to pursue a career in that. What should I do next? So most, if not all, of the program websites are going to list exactly what prerequisites or what admission requirements they need from you. So I would definitely look at the websites of any programs you're interested in, and they're going to be the ones to tell you if it's like 18 credits worth of psychology they want you to do first. That's more of a broad requirement, and then some want specific classes like research methods, stats, abnormal psych, things like that. Next question I get fairly often is, what is practicum and internship? Is there going to be someone at my school that will place me, or do I have to do that myself? Again, each program is different in how they divvy it up. For example, the program that I'm in, you have to have 200 practicum hours and 600 internship hours in order to graduate, so total 800 hours. Also, in my program, you have the option to split up those 200 practicum hours into 100 and 100, each in two different counseling environments or counseling settings to see which you like better. But basically, practicum, as you can tell, is a significantly less amount of hours than internship, and it's basically your first actual interaction with clients and your first time like being on your own as a counselor. And it also gives you a chance to try some different counseling settings that you think you might like before committing to one during internship. Someone also asked, is this only in master's or is it in doctorate programs too? You do still have practicum internship hours in a doctorate program, but it's going to be something more like 2,000 hours versus 800 in a master's. As far as a field placement coordinator goes, it totally depends on your program. For example, some do have an on-site field placement coordinator, but others do not have the funding to have one on site, so you're kind of responsible for finding your field placement yourself. But yeah, that's practicum and internship in a nutshell. Another question I've gotten before, and this was one that I had when I was applying to programs, I heard you can skip grad school and go straight into working on getting your doctorate degree. Is that true? Okay, so there's a few things to address in this question. You're not really skipping grad school because both a master's program and a doctorate program are technically grad school. But it is true that you can go straight into a doctorate program without getting your master's first in most cases. I can only think of one program off the top of my head that requires you have a master's first before going into the doctorate program. But I will say, if you don't have a master's first, you do have a pretty lessened chance of getting into the doctorate straight out of a bachelor's. I tried doing that and I did apply to very selective programs, but the vast majority of people I met at interviews and stuff already had their master's, so you would be in the minority, but it certainly is possible. It's also important to consider that some doctorate programs have a master's built into it. For example, like the first 2 years of your coursework is toward that master's, you do a master's thesis, and then after the first 2 years they award you a master's, and you have the option to get out of the program, but obviously most people keep going toward the PhD. Short answer is yes, it is possible to go straight from your bachelor's to a doctorate, but it is hard to do, and I will say you're probably going to be in the minority if you do that. Someone asked, does my program have to be CACREP-accredited? No, it doesn't have to be. There's plenty out there that are not, but it does give you a safer bet as far as transferring your license out of state lines in the future, if that's something you think you might want to do. It just helps ensure that you don't have to do additional steps in the future. For example, if you don't graduate from a CACREP-accredited program and then you take the NCE, sometimes it requires like extra documentation, extra paperwork and things like that, and I just think it's better to go through a CACREP-accredited program and not have to do that extra work. Basically, CACREP accreditation is the highest level of accreditation a master's in counseling program can have. So if you can go to a program like that, it's best. It basically just lets the licensing board know that yes, your program you attended fits these standards, the CACREP standards that they give out, so you have reached like the minimum educational requirements, if that makes sense. I know it's confusing. In the event that you get accepted to a program that isn't CACREP accredited, I think each situation is different. You'll kind of have to weigh your own personal pros and cons if it's best to either go into that program or maybe wait another year and see if you can get into a CACREP accredited program the next year. Next is, when should I start applying to grad programs? Honestly, the sooner the better. There's always something you can be working on. I would say probably junior year of undergrad, if you're going straight through, would be the time to start. So most programs' deadlines range from around December 1st to January 15th. The doctorate programs tend to be the earlier ones and the master's the later ones. So keep in mind that some programs do require the GRE, especially doctorate programs. So with that deadline in mind, November is likely going to be your last chance to take the GRE and get your scores submitted to the schools on time. And then also keep in mind you have to register to take the test a couple of months in advance, so that's something you're going to want to plan ahead for. If you've watched some of my other videos, I always mention I recommend taking the GRE in August if you at all can help it. That's what I did, and I found that it helped me a lot. This gave me a chance to retake it in November if I didn't like my first set of scores. And I actually ended up being okay with my first set of scores, so that was even better for me because then I had that weight lifted off my shoulders and I could focus more on the other parts of my application, like letters of recommendation and personal statements. Again, like I've said before, your GRE scores are good for 5 years, so also it's good if you think you might continue on to a doctorate in the future, you will still have those scores. Next question is, should I go to school in the state that I want to practice in? I would say if you can help it, if you have the option to, yes, that would be easier. But again, it's not required. People move states all the time, and it really is individual to what state you're going to and which state you're coming from, and there are requirements for licensure for each. Basically, you have to be licensed in each individual state you want to practice in. Each individual state has their own licensure, like credential. For example, here in Arizona, it's an LPC. I know in my hometown of Maine, it's an LCPC. Other states have like an LMHC. And then there's also like the specialization of marriage and family therapy, which is an LMFT. So lots of letters, but basically it just is individual to each state. So if I'm licensed in Arizona and in Maine, I would technically be an LPC and an LCPC, but it's really the same thing. And again, it really depends on the state. Some have no problem moving states, and some will make you like take additional classes if their requirements are more stringent than the one you're coming from. It just really depends. So I would definitely look up the licensure requirements for any of the states you're thinking about practicing in and kind of comparing them. And it also depends on your specialization and things like that. If it's marriage and family therapy, school counseling, career counseling, whatever it is, that's also going to make an impact. Next question is, do you get paid for your hours? So this depends on if you're still in your program or not. So clinical hours done within your program, so before you graduate with your master's, basically the practicum and internship, no, those are not paid. Those are basically just like a graduation requirement that you have to do. However, after you graduate from your master's program and take the NCE and then become an LAC, again, these letters are different for each state. You do get paid by the mental health agency that you work in, just like you would get paid through any other job. And if you're not really sure what I'm talking about there, I will link the video in the description box down below where I talk about LIC versus LPC. Next question, and I think this is a really good one because I feel like people wonder about it a lot. It's, can I write my personal statement about my own mental health treatment and how it impacted my decision to go in the field? This is a really tough one because I feel like most, if not all, counselors have had some sort of experience with mental health treatment, whether it's them or a family member that has inspired them to go in this field. But for whatever reason, that's like considered a don't in terms of your personal statements. My professors always told us, do not go that route. And people usually view it as a red flag that maybe you're going into this field to figure out your problems rather than help others with theirs, which usually isn't true at all, but for some reason they just don't like if you go that route and talk about your own personal treatment. So if you can help it at all, I would instead focus on like your experiences with internship work, whatever it is that has helped inspire you. But if you are pretty set on the fact that you want to talk about your own treatment, I would get together with some of your professors and find like a tasteful way to write about it and present it to the admissions committee. And the last question I get is usually about what I did in undergrad. So someone asked, did you participate in any honors programs or extracurricular activities in undergrad? So yes, I did. Well, again, I was a psychology major in undergrad and a sociology minor. So I'm pretty lucky that what I did in undergrad aligns pretty closely to what I do today as a counseling student. But anyways, the first thing that I did in undergrad was I did an internship with a local company called Divorce Recovery. Basically, they allow anyone that's struggling with a divorce or separation to come to them, and there's a parent group, there's children's groups. I helped lead a child's group. It was 10 to 12-year-olds who were dealing with the divorce or separation of their parents and just helping them learn ways to cope with that. And that's kind of how I fell into this profession. If you watched my earlier videos, you know that I went into college thinking I wanted to be a pharmacist. After this experience, I was pretty confident that this was what I wanted to do instead. I was also a preceptor for my psychology research methods course. Another thing I did in undergrad is I was a research assistant for a year in a lab that had a study going on adolescent suicidality. I also was in the Psi-Chi International Honor Society in Psychology. I did summer classes because I graduated a semester early, so in order to do that I did have to take summer classes and some heavier course loads. One summer I interned for a little while with the psychology department's advising team. So that's basically what I did in undergrad. But definitely doing things in undergrad like that will help you a lot in your grad school applications and certainly in your interviews, because you're definitely going to be asked about your experience. But anyways, those are the top 10 questions I found I'd been asked in the YouTube comments on my grad school videos. I hope it was helpful to have all of those answers in one video. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. I was also a preceptor for my psychology methods.